Sorry, I wasn't paying attention to the time, but this is the second part of our lecture on 20th century revival movements. We'll likely have a third section as well. Um, but as I mentioned earlier, Minnie Abrams was in India working with Pandita Ramabai, who helped establish Pentecostal revival there, really simultaneously. Actually, their revival started earlier than the Azusa Street revival, which is interesting. It really shows, what I call the trans-spatial and trans-temporal move of the Holy Spirit. That's often when the Holy Spirit establishes revival. Sometimes it occurs simultaneously in different parts of the world. Um, Lucy Farrell went from Azusa Street to Liberia. John G. Lake went to South Africa from Azusa Street, and Daniel Berg and Gunnar Vingren went to Brazil and established the very first Assembly of God churches, even before Assembly of God churches were established in the U.S. Um, After the Azusa Street revival, there was a significant long list of well known Christian evangelists that really became iconic figures in the 20th century. Among the most famous of these was a woman named Amy Semple McPherson. In fact, she was listed as one of the top 100 most influential people in the 20th century. There was more people at her funeral I believe in 1948, than any other person in the United States up to that point in history. Um, but she was a well-known evangelist. She founded the Foursquare Church, but first she went on the evangelistic field in different parts of the U.S. and then established her church, which was called Angelus Temple in Los Angeles, California, I believe in 1924. Another evangelist from that time period who was actually introduced to spirit baptism at a Amy Semple McPherson evangelistic meeting was a gentleman named Charles Price, who had large evangelistic meetings on the west, especially in the western United States. He organized some of the largest evangelistic meetings in the western United States up to that point in time. One that might be a little more familiar to some of you would be somebody named Oral Roberts, um, who only just recently passed away, but he was an extremely popular evangelist in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s. Um, Another one that certainly I hope that all of you are familiar with was Billy Graham. He and Oral Roberts both started in evangelistic ministry in 1948. Um, and but Billy Graham's ministry started with Youth for Christ, but especially it was at a Los Angeles revival that he really actually became nationally known in 1948. And he still is considered the most widely known and widely respected evangelist in the world today. Um, a generation later, the charismatic renewal began officially in 1960. You could say it started a little bit earlier than that, but there's really three primary people that helped establish this revival. Those three people, first of all, begin with someone named Jima Shakarian. I actually wrote a biography about him, but he started a Christian full gospel businessmen's group called the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship, which was really the most widely known and popular lay Christian movement of the 60s, 70s, and 80s in the United States. It began to decline in the 90s. In especially in the United States, it is actually still widely popular in certain areas of the world, in Africa and in some parts of Latin America or Central America. But there are still some influential leaders today that are part of that group. Um, another another person that, and this person is really the one that people point to that helped spark this movement, was an Anglican priest named Dennis Bennett. And in the pulpit at St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Van Nuys, California, he announced that he had been baptized in the Holy Spirit. Well, that started quite a controversy. He was asked to resign from his church, and then he was assigned a new congregation, St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Seattle, and that church turned out to be enormously popular. It became one of the largest Episcopal churches in the United States at that time, if not the largest Episcopal church. And he continued his ministry and was a popular author in the charismatic movement until his death. His wife Rita is still alive. One other person that was influential in this movement was somebody named David Duplessis. He was originally from South Africa, a Pentecostal preacher, but he really what he did was he helped cross denominational bridges and helped establish networks between different groups of Christians from a variety of different denominations that had a persuasion to believe in the baptism in the Holy Spirit, the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and this emerging popular charismatic movement. Um, so anyway, in the 1960s, this charismatic movement spread to all Christian denominations in the U.S. and globally. In the Anglican churches, charismatic revival grew so rapidly, especially in Africa, that approximately 70% of all Anglican churches globally identify themselves as charismatic or spirit-filled. Lutherans and Presbyterians in many churches widely accepted this movement. The Methodist renewal was widely accepted, especially because of two seminaries. One of those was Asbury Seminary. So Elmer Towns mentions the Asbury Seminary revival, but I don't know if he necessarily identifies it with the charismatic renewal. It was really what happened in that revival movement. It occurred in the midst of the charismatic renewal as well. So there was charismatic expressions of gifts of the Spirit and people speaking in tongues in this renewal movement at Asbury. The other seminary that was for 2 decades was a Methodist seminary, was Oral Roberts University. It is now an independent seminary, but there was a very influential Methodist preacher named Jimmy Buskirk, who was the president of the seminary at the time and helped to establish the charismatic movement in Methodist churches. There was Baptist renewal that occurred because of Christian charismatic leaders like James Robison and Pat Robertson, also John Osteen as well. All three of these people were Baptists. Probably you might be more familiar with John Osteen's son, Joel Osteen, who pastors the largest church in North America. But that church was originally started by his father, who built that church to a church of 10,000 people. Well, of course, Joel Osteen continued to grow that church. Now it's a church of 40,000. But interestingly enough, Southern Baptists finally, just this last year, finally agreed that speaking in tongues was a biblically acceptable practice. It took them a while to agree to that, but they certainly, and part of the reason for that was simply because they found that globally speaking, that Southern Baptists in other parts of the world were already speaking in tongues and spirit-filled, and I think they recognized, if you will, the writing on the wall. So one other significant renewal aspect of this renewal that I shouldn't neglect is the Catholic Charismatic Renewal. It began in 1967 as the charismatic renewal continued to grow, and certainly two different popes blessed this renewal. A bishop named Cardinal Sunens became a significant leader in this movement, and somebody named Father Raniero Cantalamessa was and still is an avid participant. But he's been the official preacher to the papal household for the past 4 decades. We're running out of time, so we're going to go to part 3 now.